So we want to, first of all, begin by thanking everybody who came today to the hall, especially our sellers who have given us listings to sell real estate. Iraj Yazdi specifically is here, who's given us 20, 30 condominiums to sell. Mark Lachter is here, who's given us a whole bunch to sell. Mr. Weissman has given us a lot of listings to sell. Mr. Gordon Waxman will be giving us a lot of business in the future to sell, so I thank you in advance. I also want to thank you publicly for all the help you've given us over the years. In fact, I remember real clearly how when I, quote unquote, started the new condos division, you gave me a call and introduced us to Mark Lachter, who's here as well. Or was here a couple minutes ago. There he is. He's always so loud. And
Rabble-rouser.
He ended up giving us a condominium project, and we did about 40 condominiums for him. So thank you very much for that introduction and for the years of very, very good advice and help. I want to acknowledge to everybody that this is a very rare Bryan that you're going to see today, because I'm going to force him to give us numbers he usually doesn't give and to talk about himself, which he almost never does. So in advance, be aware that he's only doing this because he wants to inspire others and because I'm very pushy. So thank you for getting out of your comfort zones. I'd like to begin by dedicating this program to a very dear friend of yours and somebody who's been very inspirational to me. Do you mind honoring the memory of George Smith with a couple of words, please?
For those who knew George, you caught me off guard on this one.
So let me start. George Smith, basically, for very simple language, was a regular guy who started a loan brokerage company. He financed some of the bigger projects around town. He had a daughter, God rest her soul, who didn't feel well. And he basically dedicated his life to fund research to help her survive and make sure that nobody who had what she had would ever have it again. And if anybody did, there would be a solution for it. He was a gentleman who was very rare in the industry, who always did what he said, especially in the business of brokerage. It's very rare to find somebody who is honest to everybody, even when trying to make a deal. Is that a pretty good summary of a great man?
I knew George in two different ways. I knew him personally because I asked him one time, George, why do you work so hard and why do you work so often and why don't you rest? He was very sick and very few people knew that. He was going to Mexico for surgery that either he couldn't, one reason or another didn't happen here, and he would take days off and people didn't know how sick he was. And I asked him why he continued to work, and he said, well, if I don't work, I can't fund my research. Because when I stop having the lunch, when I stop calling, people will stop writing checks. And unfortunately, that became true, despite the fact that people tried to continue that activity after he died. I also knew him professionally, and I've quoted some of the things that George told me to Yaron over the years, and one of which is something that I remember every day. He called me one day and he says, we're having breakfast tomorrow morning. And for those of you who knew George, George didn't ask, he told. And he said, I'll be at Jerry's at Topanga, and we're going to have breakfast. So I presumed he was going to introduce somebody to me because George often, some of my best and biggest clients over my lifetime have literally came off of his phone. Instead, it was he and I. And I asked him what the meeting was about. He said, you insulted one of my friends yesterday. Don't never do it again. And I said, what did I do? And he says, you gave somebody 15 minutes of your time when they took 15 years of their life on a project. And you made fun of them for having a bad project. And I told him, I said, I really didn't mean to. He goes, I don't care if you meant to or not, don't do it again. And the concept that he had was that it was one thing for me to dislike the project that I was being told about. It was another not to spend 24 hours to give it some thought and give it at least the respect that somebody deserved. And I've never gotten that, ever. One of the few people ever who called me up and told me to shut up. Here's to George.
Yeah, I think also publicly we should acknowledge that one of the impetuses of this lunch is George, and that lunch he had, or was it a breakfast?
He had
where
breakfast
took
and
Jonah-
lunch.
Where he took Jonah Goldrich up and interviewed him, and it was very inspirational to you, and you keep reminding me, and that's kind of been what pushes me to continue is doing this. Do you consider George a mentor?
Absolutely.
What is a mentor?
Somebody you can call and ask an honest question to and get an honest answer. Not worry about whether the answer is stupid or insulting or you should know the answer. Or I've been fortunate enough to have many mentors in my life, and they're the kind of people that will either A, call you and tell you that you're being one thing or another, which isn't wonderful, or you can call them and say, hey, I really don't know the answer to this and I'd like to talk it through.
You have very good definitions. What's a colleague?
A colleague is somebody that you work with.
What's a friend?
It's an individual that you trust on a level that is, can also be a colleague, during the day and a friend at night, but it's often you find that people who are your friends during the day are friends by association, not necessarily friends for life. My best friends I don't have to talk to for a year, and if I meet them in some place, it's like I never stopped being with them.
And can you do business with a friend?
I'd rather not.
Because?
You have to put their interest first if they're really a friend. And it's hard in our business to have both sides of the table unless it's a partnership.
So at one point, going back a little bit, you had 135, 150 loan agent team members. You were integral in placing about $1 billion in real estate and equity, which was about, between the two, you were integral in $5 billion of real estate happening. 10 billion probably. Oh, it's a pretty big jump. How come you don't know those numbers? Why did I have to get that out of your assistant?
Because they never mattered,
Ever?
ever.
Why?
Our business is a pretty simple business. Do one thing at a time. Whatever's in front of me is the only number I ever cared about.
To get the business, you never said, hey, I did 150 of these, listen to me, or I did 150 of these, give me the business.
I don't remember asking for business on the equity side ever. There was a problem to be solved, and I tried to solve it one problem at a time. Only history's good at adding up numbers.
So let's talk about the $1 billion you placed in equity / mezzanine. Most of the people here know what that means, but some of the people out there might not. So do you mind giving us a 1 minute of that?
We took money from Morgan Stanley and Lehman Brothers and placed it with developers in ways of joint ventures and principal transactions, usually in the risk portion, sometimes both in the risk and the debt portion. But if those of you who are own a house, the down payment is the risk or equity portion, and the debt is the portion that the bank normally does. So we would usually be in the risk or equity section as owners.
So if somebody found a piece of land that he wants to build a 40-unit condo building, the land costs $5 million and it costs $20 million to build it, where would you step in, and what kind of numbers in those numbers?
Usually 30% of the entire project would be equity and 70% would be debt. We would be interested in the 30%.
And you would put 90% of the 30% in the standard deal?
In standard transaction.
So you did about 150 developments like this. How long of a period is it on the that you were in the equity player and did the 150 developments.
8 or 10 years, I guess.
So that's about 15 to 20 a month, 15 to 20 a year, about one a month.
Correct.
And you're seeing how many projects to actually pull the trigger, to actually fund 150 in that period.
Hundreds or thousands.
Tell us a little bit about the vetting process. How did the vetting process go in your office when these thousands of deals would come into to your office?
I make decisions. I'm a rules-based kind of person. I create the rules and then require myself and others to follow them. And so the vetting was really simple: people, plan, project, in that order.
Let's go by one. There used to be a terminology that I grew up, which was location, location, location. And that's not even the first one in your... So when a project comes into your inbox or into your assistant's inbox, the first question is?
I never ever got a phone call from George saying, hey, I want to show you a property. He always said, hey, there's this guy I want you to meet. And then, like, the guy didn't care about the project.
And even doing 150 developments, that was always the first thing, even if it was a good project, but the sponsor was not somebody you could trust or believed can execute, you didn't get to go through it.
We used to say that we wanted to know if the glass of red wine at the pity party was going to be just as much fun to drink as the champagne at the celebration.
It's actually a very interesting concept you bring to the table that I haven't seen many developers do. Even though you vetted 1,000 or maybe thousands into 150, you weren't 100% sure each one would work.
You're never sure.
You once told me that if you are going to buy property, try and buy them 5 at a time, because then your average of what you're trying to do will happen. Do you still believe that?
I don't remember the comment, but I would believe that there's always a top third, a bottom third, in the middle.
Even after you vet and after you do everything that you do?
Absolutely. Especially when you're in the risk business.
If you do as much research and have as much experience as you had, are you still in the risk business?
Absolutely.
Yeah? What was that smile for? What did I miss?
Henry walked in.
Previous mentor, we should all get up. Henry Mundercherry, thank you for coming. 150 developments, did they all play out like you thought? The ones that you thought would be home runs turned out to be home runs and thoughts you did business?
Absolutely not.
Not. You once told me that you made a lot of money on one you didn't really believe would make a lot of money, and you lost on one you really did believe would make a lot.
Very true.
A question I've asked you many times, and I still don't understand it, and hopefully you explain to them and they will, is how do you sleep at night with so much money out and so much risk out? How can you manage all that stress, all that change?
You mean after my daughters are tucked in tight?
Yes.
My business day starts at 5 a.m. and it ends at 7 p.m. and if you want me after that, you need to call in advance, because otherwise my phone gets shut off, and tomorrow we'll do it again.
In the crazy of crazy, 7 it was off unless you needed to be.
Say again?
In the crazy period of time, at 7 p.m. it would be off.
I might still be on the road seeing properties or coming back or going to an event, which I generally don't go to most. But yeah, once I'm home, the phone gets turned off, and if it's not about the children or something that has nothing to do with work, it'll be there tomorrow.
Beautiful. I thought I had a question that would stomp you, so I sent it to you in advance. What was that question?
I said, what did I learn throughout all of the turmoil of the last few years?
Yes, and you said?
I said there's 2 answers to that question. The first of which is exceptions are bad.
Exceptions are bad.
Yeah, exceptions are bad. Every time I've ever made an exception, I've regretted it. So I decided never to make any more exceptions. And the second thing is...
That's so not natural for you, being such a rules-based person.
You know, there's an it depends. You start to believe your own press clippings that you get involved in a project, you can make it that much better, or you can get past this one thing. The answer is you can't. Exceptions are bad. The other thing is that the word only is the worst word in real estate.
Only.
Only. Don't
What-
use it and don't trust anyone who does.
For example,
Here's my question to you. Use only in a real estate sentence.
I'm the only person who can build this. I'm the only person who can do this. This is the only property that can have this type of use.
And then the absolute worst, I only need $25 million. The word only in real estate is the worst word in real estate because it's never true. You always need more. You're not the only person. You're not the only project, and your project isn't the only one of its kind. Because if that's the case, I guarantee there's 10 people in the room that will go find a way to replicate it.
So when I emailed you that question, you said that's going to be an easy question to answer because I think about it every day.
Absolutely.
If you already figured it out, why are you still thinking about it every day?
Those who do not learn from history are deemed to repeat it.
Okay, so on the equity piece, before we get to the equity piece, 150 developments in the business for as long as you've been. How many developers would you say you intimately know? 200?
At least.
Okay. What makes a good developer?
Among other things, passion, honesty, creativity. And they generally have to be insane.
Why? The last one.
They have to care more about their project than they do anything other than their family.
And most of them do.
No, most of them don't. If they're in it for the money, it's a problem. We used to call it, if they want to be, two things you never want to be. One is somebody wants to be mayor of the town, so they want to build something that makes them so famous and wonderful about how they do their project that they want to, run for mayor. And the second of which is somebody who wants to be in, only wants to be in the project to make a penny.
One time I asked you what's the best way to make $20 million. Do you remember the answer?
Mm-hmm.
What's the answer?
Make 80 and lose 60.
And you still believe that?
Absolutely.
So there is no one way up. It's all a cycle. There's always ups and downs.
Well, I wish there was one way up, but I haven't. Let's put it this way: I don't know exactly where the GPS is for that particular road. I'm open to suggestions if anyone has any.
But you saw 200 developers. None of them broke that rule. None of them have a magic formula.
Only one person I've ever known who's never lost money, and by their own admission, I think, to paraphrase, we looked smart because we couldn't find anything to do just before the crash. We didn't find a project for 2 years, and so everybody thinks we're brilliant.
Yeah,
They thought they were stupid at the time.
Once most of your employees know how to do Excel with two hands. What does that mean?
Oh, not most, some.
Some.
My best story is there was this guy that I hired, a guy named Gabriel. He's a very close friend of mine now. And I was showing him the spreadsheet that I was working on, and I really thought that I was smart. And he was behind me, and he kept just like inching forward, and he said, do you want me to help you there? What are you trying to accomplish? And I told him, and he started playing the keyboard like an organ, one hand on the F keys and another one on the little keys. And he asked me if I could just like take a few minutes and go fill my coffee cup up, and he had rewritten the spreadsheet by the time I got back. And it actually worked. And to this day, when I send him a spreadsheet, he's in New York now, and if I send him a spreadsheet that I've been working on for several days, he gets frustrated and asks me just next time, just call me and ask me what it is you're trying to accomplish. It's much faster for me to do it. He's a little bit younger than I am.
So you hired employees that were better than you in the thing you hired them for?
Absolutely. There was a guy named Bill Dallas who was one of my mentors early on in the mortgage business who said that smart guys are 7s who hire 10s and stupid guys are 7s who hire 5s. Never forgot that.
So what is your role?
Coach.
What does that mean in a day-to-day practical matter?
Set the business plan, set the strategy, get the best team you can, make adjustments during the game.
So does that go back to the rule base, set the rules of how to engage and what to
Absolutely.
look for? And how do you, is it just a rule that was given to you that you play with until it breaks and fix, or is it, do you actually take time to think about your rules?
That's what I think about almost every minute of every day.
Your rules. Do you have any quiet practice, or while there's all the noise is when you're thinking, or when is the best time to think?
I start early in the morning. Even the last couple of years when I'd like to have been busier than I am, I start at 5 o'clock at my desk at the house. I usually don't take calls until about 8:30 unless it's somebody who knows I work at my desk at the house. It's my quiet time to think, to read. I always wrote contracts and proposals during that time. Then I take a shower, and that's where I get most of my good thinking done, as hot a shower as I can take until there's no more hot water in both hot water heaters in my house. That's where I get the good thinking done, and then I get in the car, and on the way in I usually make all my phone calls to the office.
You had, there's many people, including myself, who call their assistants, employees, team members. But you actually really believed you were a team.
Doesn't work any other way. Not the way I work.
You actually do a profit share?
In the good days we did.
And do you mind sharing the general formula of what you think is right? Or is it right, or just what you did?
A, I don't remember, and B, I wouldn't share if I did.
Was
Because
it
it'd be
something,
somebody else's income, and I wouldn't want to share that.
was it something you learned to share the profits with the team, or is it something you came up with?
I don't think there's ever been an original idea that I had, so I'm sure it wasn't mine. I think I don't remember who suggested it to me, but I always think that people on the team should be part of the team, good and bad.
Beautiful. Let's go back to before the billion and your loan broker.
Mm-hmm.
How does going into becoming an equity player happen?
There was a builder that came to me, and we were doing the takeout loans on their takeout loans of the loans for consumers to buy houses. One of our guys was doing on site for about a 60 or 70 unit project up in Agora, and developer came and literally threw a package that was about 3 inches thick at me across the desk and said, "Troxler, I need model home financing," because in those days you couldn't get, your construction loan didn't cover model homes. It was a separate loan. And I think it was Imperial Credit Bank or Imperial something or other. Was Imperial? Somebody it had the word Imperial in it. They stopped doing loans, and that was the only game in town. And so he threw it across the table and said, "Troxler, I figure this out, or I'll find somebody who can." And so I got on the phone, couldn't figure it out. So the last call I made was to my representative at General Motors Acceptance Corporation, which was our warehouse line, and said, "Do you mind if I take $1 million and carve it off for loans that I'm not going to sell?" Called him up and said the problem was solved. Unfortunately, he had dinner with another developer that same night. Next morning, that developer called me and said, "Troxler, how come you can do it for him and not for me?" Next call was to see if I could get that $1 million moved to $5 million. Thankfully, she hadn't put the request in, so she put it in as a $5 million request, and 5 became 5, 5 became 10. Eventually, General Motors dumped our project off to Bank United of Texas, who was a participant in the line of credit. And when Bank United of Texas was purchased by Washington Mutual, we were their biggest debtor.
And when you say we, that's you, Bryan Troxler, personally?
It was the company.
And with that kind of personal cash out, stress levels the same? Hours the same?
Hours the same, stress the same.
One day at a time, one deal at a time.
My desk is the cleanest desk in the whole thing. I only work on one thing at a time. Then and now. I'm not that smart. I can't do more than one thing at a time.
Let's go back even further back. Why did you become a loan broker originally?
I worked for a gentleman who took me out of UCLA when I graduated. He was a individual that taught me real estate, stocks, bonds. He was actually started at the old Bruce Haynes company. And I started with him. He moved to Atlanta. I didn't want to move, so we were doing a lot of business with CalFed at the time, the apartment buildings. So I went to work for CalFed. 6 weeks later, I found out CalFed wasn't going to be in the apartment business anymore, and they moved me over to the residential loan side. And I remember going to this training session. They gave me this little training book and said, you know, we're going to trainings next week. And so they said, read this, and I read it. Showed up on Monday, and they literally started reading every word to me. For those in the room who know me, I'm not the most patient person in the world. And so it was about 10 o'clock when I raised my hand and I said, I'm sorry, but are you literally for this week going to be reading every word of these paragraphs to us? And the guy thought I was a smartass, which probably is true. And so he said, well, if that's the case, the next thing we're going to talk about is, you know, debt coverage ratios on apartments. Maybe you'd like to teach it. And I said, I'll be happy to. So I got up and I said, now the most important thing about the book is it doesn't really tell you how to do your vacancy factor. So when you read the book, if you haven't already, and the guy said, you're excused, and I was sent home. And about 2 weeks later, I started my own company.
Is that really how it happened?
Exactly how it happened.
Wow. How'd you get business when you were a loan broker? Door knocker?
Solve a problem for one person and let them tell somebody else. I've really never asked for business. I'm not a very good salesman.
No postcards, no flyers that I can do your loan, infomercials at late night on a boat.
Cindy's known me for almost that entire time. I don't think I've ever done that.
No?
I don't think I've ever done that.
So how'd you build? How'd you get more and more?
When you solve a problem for somebody, keeping it secret is really hard. One of my mentors, a guy named Larry Rasmussen, told me one time that people who tell things about what they do is not very valuable. Let somebody else do it. And the best thing in the whole wide world to do is help somebody, and if they can't keep their mouth shut about what happened today if you help them.
And that goes back to why you don't say I did 150 developments or I put out this amount of money. You're always just focused on getting the job done. Can I help? And if so, will you let me help?
I'm interested in solving the problem. My biggest problem is I always forget who I solved it for, because I never really cared that much about the people, more about their problems.
What was the most important for you when you were a loan broker?
The most important thing I was doing?
Making rent? Getting assistance to help you so you're not working hard?
Telling the truth.
At the beginning?
Yeah, it wasn't a lot of people telling the truth in the industry in 1987.
Thank God it's changed a lot since then.
Not so much.
Thank you.
One of my mentors gave me the watchword, and you'll kind of know that all my watchwords have threes in them, but I don't know why. But right, legal, and profitable, and always in that order, is a really good way of making decisions.
Yeah,
when I had managers that had, you know, millions of dollars of decisions to make every day, or somebody who had to go to the store and figure out what to order for lunch, if you make a decision that's right, legal, and profitable in that order, it's almost impossible to be wrong, and you'll never get somebody like me to argue with the answer. So early on, as a mortgage broker, I tried to do what was right, legal, and profitable in that order, and never worried about somebody coming back to me and say, you did something that was wrong or illegal, or you lied, or because if they didn't want me to tell the truth, they had the wrong person.
So when you say being honest, you mean right, legal, and profitable?
In that order. Almost never do you have to worry about getting all the way through, because the right answer almost is always legal and profitable. There's very few situations in life that you get to the second or third when you actually have to make that particular decision.
Our program is called a mentorship program. I thought eventually to change the name to Regular People Doing Extraordinary Things. But you're not regular. It doesn't bother you that you're not regular, does it?
Not at all.
I once called you weird and you just laughed.
I've been called far worse things.
Why are so many people hung up about being like everybody else and not willing to just be the individual they are?
You'd have to ask them. For my case, I was raised in a small town in a large family, and we knew what we were, and there wasn't a lot of gray area. I'm not very big on gray area.
I once asked you, do you have any problems with making money or losing money? And you said to me, as long as I did the best I could for myself and my family, I go to sleep okay.
I sleep incredibly well.
The question is, how do you evaluate best? Because you're a go-getter and you can always do better. How can you ever be okay that what you did was best?
There's a book that purportedly is an interview with Harry Truman called Plain Speaking. It was one of my favorite books ever that I read. And President Truman, who never really wanted to be president, would say that I'm not smarter now than I was then, I just have more information. And the concept is quite indulgent to believe that a decision that I made at the time, that I had the most information that I could get at the time, that I'm looking back on it, I want to learn from what happened with the decision, but I don't look at the decision. I only look at the results of the decision to see, is that new information for a new decision? It's quite indulgent to evaluate decisions you made and say, well, oops, I was wrong. No, I made the best decision I could make at the time, and I was the one that was chosen or requested or available to make it.
Continuing on the quote-unquote specialty of who you are, you bought and sold a lot of properties. You told me that you don't really believe in 1031 exchanges.
No.
Do you mind sharing with us, please?
Most people I know who have gone fully broke as opposed to problematically challenged, like some of us have been in the last few years, have gone because of the IRS. And so I've always believed that it's not exactly a great thing to have them either as a partner or a foe. And the problem with 1031 exchanges, for the people in the room, I'm not an accountant, I'm not your CPA, and I'm not your attorney, so this is advice from myself. I don't do 1031 exchanges because if I really screw something up, when I go to sell it, I don't want to have the IRS as a silent partner that I have from a previous time when I made money. Now I've got to recapture that. And so my advice to others when I've managed their money is if you're going to 1031, you need to 1031 into a piece of property that you will never sell, that will always cash flow, and that you need to put in trust someplace away from your own ability to screw it up.
You also believe in paying taxes on income and not being too aggressive with expenses and
For the
other
very
gains.
same reason, the IRS has their own police force and their own courts. Doesn't seem like a fair fight.
Going back to your loan agent, how do you grow from being an individual loan agent to a team of 130, 150 people?
One person at a time, inviting them to come and play.
And you thought about it as a game. This is something you want to enjoy. This is something...
Working is one of the most fun things in the entire world. It's absolutely a game.
always has been.
Yeah, I think so. Well, there are certain times that I didn't like the game, but yeah.
What made a good loan broker?
For me, they could write legal and profitable in that order. Unfortunately, there were a lot of people that worked with me over the years that couldn't tell the truth, and we had to get rid of them.
And if they couldn't tell the truth, even though they were making money for the company and for you, there was no question about it.
My favorite comment ever was when the third largest producer in our company was doing $50 or $60 million of business a year said, "I am too big, you cannot change the way I do business." And I said, "That's not true. I can change where you do it," and I handed him his license.
Just like that, third biggest producer.
Yeah.
How'd you feel the day after?
I don't think I thought about it the day after.
Do you think much about things you do before the day after,
I think about them before, but not after.
except to analyze the results to see if there's something you can learn from it?
Mm-hmm.
You closed the division of loan brokers. Why?
In 2008, I thought that the consumer generally wanted a scapegoat for their own decisions. And I saw what was coming forth where the consumer wanted help one day and then to sue the person the next day that helped them. And so I decided I didn't want to be in the business anymore. We actually closed a very large and profitable mortgage company just because I decided I didn't want to be in the business. I'd been in it too long and it was time for me to exit.
But it was profitable,
Yes, it was.
and it's a business.
Yes.
So why do you close a profitable business again?
Because I owned it and I didn't want to be in it.
What would you share with a realtor or a loan broker who's starting out today or growing today?
Have a passion for helping people.
So it goes to the same of a developer. Be passionate about what you want to do.
Have a passion for creating something. A developer has the ability to take this, and I'm not a developer. I laugh when the LA Business Journal said I was one of the largest developers ever. I thought that's hysterical. I'm a money guy. I can't build squat. I have to hire somebody to build shelves in my garage. A developer has this ability to see what doesn't exist and create it. Yeah, they might bring engineers and architects and all sorts of other people, but a true developer has the ability to take my favorite project ever was this 18-story mid-rise at South San Francisco on the hill that we got a chance to finance. And you looked at this hill and you went, I'm going to literally glue this 18-story building onto the side of it. And oh, by the way, South San Francisco has these 60-mile-an-hour winds. And I'm going to use those winds I'm going to capture that wind in a way that my ventilation bills will be less. I'm sitting there thinking, this thing's going to blow off the frickin' hill. And this guy's thinking, my air conditioning bill is going to be really low. And that was a George Smith deal. It was one of my favorite deals ever. If you fly into South San Francisco, you see a hill that says South San Francisco, the industrial building. There's an 18-story Tinker Toy up against that hotel, up against that hill that a guy named Jack Myers envisioned, created, and built, and all I did was write a couple of checks on somebody else's checkbook.
Interesting. Going back to your rules. You touch a drink, what happens?
You're drunk.
Period. Not if you drink it, not if you only have one cup.
I have two daughters, for those people who don't know, and they're both grown now, but we had to create some rules when we were trying to figure out how we were going to raise our children. And so what we told them, first of all, we used to have the privilege of going to Canada for the holidays in the winter. And there was a sommelier that taught my daughters how to drink wine when they were French legal age, which is pretty much, that means they can walk. And I wanted my daughters to learn how to drink wine before they learned how to drink beer in the back of some guy's garage. And so we taught them that if you touch the stem, you no longer have the sense to know whether you're drunk or not. So at that moment, call for a ride, and we try to. It's an easy. This is and this isn't. There's no gray in it. You touch this and it's got alcohol in it. You're not driving home, and it's perfectly fine.
And when you do and then drive, what do?
When I do what?
Touch and then drive.
Well, I've done it about 3 times in my life that I can remember, and I've been very angry at myself for all 3 of them.
Just 3 in your whole life?
That I can remember.
Wow.
Well, let me rephrase that. 3 since I made that rule. There was those days at UCLA. I wouldn't. the fact that I actually lived through those years were phenomenal.
Do you mind sharing some of the stuff that you're doing for the country, for the soldiers?
I also have the privilege of being a scuba instructor for individuals with mental or physical problems. My specialty is individuals in wheelchairs, but I also had to adapt that a bit to post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, which is the unfortunate walking wounded situation of these last few years. And I've had the privilege to be part of the Disabled Veterans Scuba Project as well as the Challenges Foundation. And we teach both veterans and non-veterans who have, for one reason or another, either by birth or by the challenges of what they've signed up for, have special challenges. And there's something for those of you who ever had a chance to be underwater. There is peace that is like none other, especially for people that have 24/7 ringing in their ears or pain in their bodies. The pressure of the water has actually been proven to take the pressure of spinal cord injuries away. One lady who got shot out of a helicopter, this is her story and she's told it on a movie, so I'm not breaching her confidence. She got shot out of a helicopter as a nurse in the military. And in addition to many other things and all the trauma that goes along with a female being captured by the other side, she's, in her fall, she had a spinal cord injury, and if she doesn't scuba dive every 3 or 4 days, she's on morphine. When she gets a chance to scuba dive, she's pain-free.
And how often do you do this?
As often as I can. At least once a week, sometimes more.
And how do you find that after you do that day, how are you the next day?
But tired. There's a lot of lifting and moving of stuff. So privileged.
You shared a funny story. If you that there's some soldiers who sometimes come and help, and if you tell a soldier go take those 20 tanks and put them outside, how will that task end?
We were down at the Los Alamitos training base on a Sunday night, and the Joint Training Base, it's an interesting place, and I was never in the military, so I didn't really understand the culture much. I was just there to help and lend a hand where I knew how. And there's a tremendous influx of people that are there only for a couple of weeks at a time, and most of them know we're there, so they come over and they help on their spare time when they're not on duty. And this one young man, 19, 20 years old, just, I mean, he was an oil can with a head, just incredibly strong, huge dude. And he came in and he said, I'm here to help. And he goes, but I'm scared of the water and I don't want to get wet. I said, perfect. See all those tanks? I need those tanks moved over there. And it was about 2 hours later, I was coming by and he was sitting next to the tanks. No one had told him what else to do, so he had done that and stopped. And I looked at this lieutenant colonel who I work with and who's in charge of the program, and I said, I don't understand. How come he didn't come back? You didn't tell him to. I went, okay. I've learned something about that. That was a couple of years ago, and since then it's like, well, you need to move the tanks and then come see me for something else. It's just a different culture. It's not the culture I'm used to. And so, if there are rules to everything, and that's not my set of rules. I just presumed that the guy would come back.
How do you get a soldier to do something really quickly?
Tell the lieutenant colonel.
There's a term in double fast, double quick.
Move with a purpose.
Move with a purpose. Do you use that at all? Or
No, my approach is that I don't want to be insulting to somebody else's culture, whether it's military or religious or geographical or anything else. I try to respect everybody. And so since I'm not certain how that term is used by people amongst their own culture, and the military has their own unique culture, if I have that problem, I will tell somebody in the military, I need this done and I need it done right now.
Los Angeles Kings are about to win their championship, hopefully.
Go Kings.
So we started crying, we'll end laughing. What do you see about their run that is inspiring?
Their teamwork. Absolute positively, they are not the collection of the best players in hockey.
They are not.
They are absolutely not the best players in hockey.
What
They
they
are
is
is they are a team. They've got a lot of good players, and yes, Jonathan Quick is an outstanding goalie. But they are a perfect study of what can happen when nobody cares who gets credit. I think I saw the stat this morning that said 17 of the 24 players that have played in the playoffs have scored. Any of you who've ever run an organization, to see that sort of offense or that sort of sales commission or sales rate or whatever you guys do, to see 17 of 24 people do anything is phenomenal. And then for nobody to care who gets credit is phenomenal. And it's absolutely positively they've got a coach who came in and taught a bunch of disparate individuals how to work as a team. And I just hope he doesn't go back to the farm.
Thank you very, very much for sharing.
My pleasure.
Thank you for coming. I'd like to open up to questions from anybody who has questions. We still haven't figured the questions out from the crowd, so whatever question you get, if you don't mind repeating the question and then answering it, I'd appreciate it.
Got it.
Any questions? Oh, perfect. This is the first shutout. Oh, no. Go ahead. You're ruining the stats, but it's okay. I love you.
Could you talk a little bit more about your experience as a big brother?
Happy to. That's one of my favorite things to do. The Big Brother program and the Big Sister program, for those of you who don't know, matches one adult with one child, boys between 8 and 15 and girls between 6 and 16 when they start the program, and it goes all the way through 21. And the match is created to assist, to create a one-on-one bond where that might not exist in the current family structure, or where somebody somehow or another decided that the young man or woman needs something different. In my case, my little brother, when he was 6, had a stroke. And so he's hemiplegic, which means that his left side doesn't work particularly well. And my experience with scuba diving allowed him to learn a few things, like the words "I can't" are not my favorite. We redefined those words to mean that means we'll do it next. So he doesn't use it anymore. After a year, he's decided that if he says "I can't," we'll stop the car and do whatever it is he says he can't do. And just kind of learn that you can as opposed to "I can't." Other individuals in the Big Brother program, and I don't know as much about the Big Sister program, but I presume it's similar, work with some children that one of my friends works with a young man that he had to violate the rules because we're not allowed to give anything above $25 to our littles because they're afraid of the whole buying friendship or craziness. He had to violate the program and give him a cell phone, and the reason is the kid lives out of a car and doesn't know where he's going to be when he could never be in the same place to pick his little brother up when he was supposed to see him. So now he has to figure out that, okay, I'm going to give you a phone and I'm going to call you and you tell me where it is you are, because he's never in the same place at the same time. So the great thing about the program is that you're matched with one young man or young woman, and you can focus your attention on that person's needs. And having raised a couple of girls that are now gone, I'm, figure I'd have a little extra time.
Any other questions? Yeah, Mark?
The question is, how did I earn the confidence of Lehman and Morgan Stanley? Morgan Stanley is easy. We'd already done $500 or $600 million worth of business with Lehman, and so they came and asked us. In the case of Lehman, the best of my recollection, this is how it happened. I was in a meeting where a guy from Lehman Brothers was saying, I really wish that I could get, I need to get $15 million in equity out by next month. And I would like to say, I'm sure I could do that for you. I probably said, how tough could that be? Because that'd be more likely the kind of comment I would say. And he said, well, if you can do it, I really need you to do it. And I said, well, I can guarantee I can do it. What I didn't tell him was that there were about 10 projects on my desk waiting for our line of credit to get paid down, because those of you who used our line of credit for their equity positions would know that they were next in line, but unless somebody else paid it down, we only had $55 million on the line of credit, and so if you needed, somebody had to pay it down for us to use it for somebody else. And so we had 8 or 10 projects on our desk, and I went back, we wrote them up, we took them to Westwood, and we funded them within about 2 weeks. And I think to this day I have a contract with Lehman that says I can do 7 projects or $15 million, whichever happens first. I don't really think that there was ever a discussion longer than that.
So the whole building was 7 at a time, 15 million at a time.
No, they just kept writing transactions. I don't think they ever re-engaged us to do anything other than the next one.
Just let me know.
So the question started with, do I perceive myself as a visionary or a problem solver? And then also, if I'm not a visionary, how would or how did I or would I put together an efficient team? I'm absolutely not a visionary. Never have been, never want to be. The special skill that I have is to help people who are visionaries achieve their visions. The first thing you need to be willing to do is agree that you're not a visionary and be willing to ask somebody diligently what it is they're trying to accomplish. Those of you who've been in a meeting with me over the years, I guarantee you've heard me say, tell me what you're trying to do. Tell me what you're trying to accomplish. Well, I don't know. Come back when you do know. Because I don't know either. Once you can tell me what you're trying to accomplish, I can either use the phone or some other important tool to help you do it. And how do you, that's the first portion of your question. The second portion of your question, as far as how do you build an efficient team, I'd like to quote Colin Powell. General Powell said one time, and I'm paraphrasing, that if you need 100 tanks and 100 men and women and 100 aircraft, send 1 million of each. That would be my answer.
I didn't understand that one at all.
His
How's that
concept,
translate to business?
his concept was, if you believe that in order to solve a problem, you need to have certain building blocks, get more blocks. If I thought I needed 5 smart people, I'd get 6. Because when you don't have a smart person that you need, you want to get all the smart people around you can get. And then the second part of that answer would be, how do you build an efficient team? Stay the heck out of their way. Put 6 people in a room and you'll know who the leader is. You don't need to say so. They'll figure it out amongst themselves. And so my companies always work by teams. 5 or 6 people working on a project, and you would think that you knew that the person who had the highest title or the most salary would be the person in charge, and it very rarely was the case. The person in charge was the person who had the amount of time to spend an extra hour that morning working on the project.
And when you underwrote, was that also if you needed a 6, you would underwrite to a 7?
No. I underwrite projects based upon, does it meet the criteria of the investor that I'm investing for?
But under your formula of if you need 10, get 20.
I'm talking humans, smart people. As far as when you're underwriting a real estate project, for me, I always work with somebody else's money. They set the criteria for what they want to accomplish. So I'm interviewing a couple of funds right now who want to put more money out. If they can't tell me exactly what they want to put the money in, they need to hire somebody else. My job is to execute on their business plan, not to create the plan. I can help them and tell them what I think, but my job is to assist them in solving the problem that they have, which is, we have this money, we need this yield. We have this risk return matrix. Execute on it. First part, what have I been doing? The legacy issues of having a partner like Lehman go bankrupt are phenomenally large. I figure I'll be done with them about 2014, and I started in 2006. For those of you who don't know, Lehman stopped paying their bills at around 2006, not 2008. So we all kind of were dealing with this longer than the public knew. What have I been doing since then? I have been working for a couple of banks doing their legacy issues. I've been working for a couple of sovereign funds, giving them advice. I've been looking for the time and the right partnership to open a new fund. I believe that time is pretty soon. And the type of projects that I like, on the moderate risk basis, I like residential housing for rent. On the medium risk, I like retail and mini storage. And on high risk, I like office. And again, I'm not a specialist, I'm a generalist. I match yield to risk. So if somebody's trying to get a 25% yield, they're not going to do it in residential for lease housing. They can do it in office if they've got the stamina and the guts. I was going to use a different word, I'm sorry.
So do you consider yourself a mortgage banker in essence? Or
No.
a broker? Or how would you, is there a term that we can?
I'm kind of a fixer.
Okay.
What's your definition? Come on, give us the definition.
A fixer?
Fixing, finding a. Well, you got a rule for your business. What is it? Finding a.
If the business plan I wrote for myself when I got my MBA in 1987 was
You
find
have an
problems to
MBA?
profitably solve.
Find problems
To profitably solve. Hasn't changed much.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Mr. Troxler.